Awesome. All right. Well, you know what? I'm going to get started, more folks might join. We're definitely going to save this video. You'll be able to find it on our profile in the Reels section afterward, and we'll also post it on the coworker.org website. So anything that was mentioned that you want to come back to, you'll have a chance to view the video at any point in the future as well. Just to get started, this is the second in a series of workplace health and safety conversations that we've been having. This is hosted by coworker.org. We have no affiliation with Starbucks. Let me say that off the bat. We're an independent nonprofit organization, and we exist basically to help workers to organize and get the tools and resources they need to improve their workplaces. In the last few years, tens of thousands of baristas have joined and started campaigns on our petition platform on Coworker to improve conditions at Starbucks. And those campaigns have included everything from paid parental leave to safe needle disposal to getting closing cafes and getting paid time off at the beginning of the pandemic. Since the last year, we've seen a lot of health and safety issues coming up. So we figured we'd do this kind of like try out this Instagram live kind of conversation where people can submit questions ahead of time about how to stay safe in the workplace. And we'll bring on some experts who can share their perspective. And of course, always feel free to reach out to us at Coworker as well if you have any questions. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to, hopefully, if I can get this right, invite our guest to join us today. We're really lucky to have with us Jessica E. Martinez. She's the co-executive director of the National Council for Occupational Health and Safety, which we'll be referring to as National COSH from now on. There's a link to them in our website, in our bio. So if you just go to the link in our bio, you can see their website. And here we have Jessica. Thanks so much for joining. Great to see you.
Hi, Tim.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. And I should add that Jessica Martinez is a nationally recognized movement leader at National Coach. She has spearheaded organizing public policy and education initiatives for the past 9 years, although has it been even longer? Is that right?
Almost 10, I think.
Almost
Oh,
10.
don't
Wow,
remind me
almost
how
a
old I
decade.
am.
The time goes fast, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially
totally.
in a moment like this. Let me just say that for sure. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful that we have you today and that you're taking the time. First off, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that National Kosh does, especially
Thank you.
in the last year or so.
I know. Well, thanks, Tim. First, thank you to your organization. It's been a pleasure to collaborate with coworker.org. And again, we complement our work so much because National Kosh is a national leader in the fight for safe and healthy working conditions for all workers. And I know that the name of our nonprofit organization, the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health, sounds super formal. We get confused with a government agency. We are not. We are a lot more grassroots than that. We are supporting campaigns on the local level, ensuring that workers have access to information around what their rights are around workplace health and safety. We strategize. We ensure that they feel empowered to come together as a collective and build worker power. So I'm really happy to be here, and I really appreciate your nice words, but by no means am I consider myself an expert, but rather more of a moderator, facilitator to ensuring that our voices come together and be able to provide a little bit of insight to some of the technicalities. I know that a lot of folks have been hearing so much on the mainstream media about, new guidelines, new laws and so forth. And I have to say that as an organization, we have been knowing about some of the health and safety concerns of workers and how important they are for way before the pandemic even started. But come the pandemic, there's now a shift in the importance around health and safety for workplaces, the community. Infectious disease, in this case, COVID-19, is not something that stays at the work site. I mean, the fear and the reality is that we can take it home, we can take it back to our communities. It impacts us all. And the sad reality is that, it also has disproportionately impacted in more serious ways communities of color. So very early on, we were tasked with being able to provide some guidance, some support, some information to workers about what they can do to protect themselves at work, despite the lack of
Hmm.
leadership from government and from the former administration, which was completely anti-worker, anti-safety, anti-healthy communities. Um, Fast forward to where we are now. Um, we know that we still continue to see a high number of COVID cases in the US, with more than
Hmm.
35,000 new cases detected, infections reported each year, and more than 600 people dying of COVID each day. Just today, just yesterday, I mean,
Wow.
uh, 780 people died from COVID-19. So I only mention that because it's a reality. It's still here. We're not quite done. Yes, science is amazing. We
Hmm.
have vaccines, but the reality is this impacts workers and your members and your audience. And I'm here to delve a little bit deep on what we can do as a community to fight this injustice.
Excellent. Well, that all sounds great. And I mean, the timing for this conversation is, uh, timely, I'll just
Yeah,
say, because
yeah.
just yesterday, as folks will know, Starbucks did adopt some of the CDC guidelines of allowing customers who have been fully vaccinated to be in stores without face masks in places where there's not a local mandate around that. So
Mhm.
that's a big change for baristas. Some people are definitely concerned. One question we got from a barista said, for states that still require masks indoors, except when eating and drinking, how do we keep ourselves safe and avoid verbal abuse while still allowing all the mandates? So that's just one question. And I should mention also, like, we very much welcome folks to use the chat, comment live right now to add additional questions that you have about any workplace health and safety issue. But getting into this one right now, what can workers do to protect themselves right now? There's a patchwork of different policies in different places, but
Yeah.
assuming that, customers may be coming in without masks.
Right. And also understanding, I'm aware that the folks joining this call come from all over the country, and each of our states, local jurisdictions may have different guidelines. But very important for the states still requiring, it should be keeping the mask policy in place. But in places without mask requirement, workers could be demanding company policy to continue to require masks, to continue to protections for workers and public. I have to say something that you'll catch on that I will mention any opportunity that I get is the importance of collective action among your work coworkers. As the title of your organization is, that there's so much more power in being able to team up with your fellow baristas, coffee workers, your supervisors, to be able to talk to some of your district supervisors or whatever it may be the case, into making sure these policies stay in place. I wanted to do a quick shout out. I think Noelle Tengart is on the Instagram
I
live,
think so.
and I just met her yesterday. I just wanted to do a quick shout out because she gave me so much insight. We were chatting over email about the realities of Starbucks workers, and one of the things that she made me aware. Again, I'm no expert. I have not worked myself as a barista, which I was so happy to be able to exchange some emails with Noelle about her own experience as a barista, is that the signage in the workplace is so important, in this particular
Mm.
case at the cafes.
Hmm.
The more that customers are aware of mask policies, the less that you have to put workers in an awkward position of some confrontation, and it's easier to sort of encourage that policy and make sure folks are following. To my knowledge, in the early days of the pandemic, Starbucks had a mask policy before many states or
Hmm.
counties.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
but they struggled with resistant customers and some that were just not following or were not aware of local guidance, guidelines, and so forth. And as Noel shared with me, this completely exacerbated the district managers started taking down, the mass reminder signs from and store managers had to put up, et cetera, et cetera. So this inconsistency, coming from management, definitely the ones that get the impact are workers. And I don't have to tell your audience here who very well know this. So making sure that you make that request and demand that signage stays up makes work a lot easier. but also to the point is ensuring that workers continue to wear filtration mask, double mask. That's also a key piece. Do not get complacent about it. Get
Mm-hmm.
properly fitted and seal into your mask. That's really important. When you need to unmask, do it outdoors where there is a circulation and better ventilation and so forth. So that would be
Okay.
my recommendation.
That's great. That's great. And Noel, so glad to see you here. And I should just mention, we can add one person to ask questions and share comments live. So Noel, no pressure, but if you do want to jump in and share anything, let me know and I can add you in. But I'm going to go backwards to some other stuff. But since we're kind of on this topic, I did kind of want to jump into the question of customer abuse. And unfortunately, there's kind of like a continuum here where front-facing workers who deal with customers all day, experience all kinds of abuse and tension, as you were alluding to, with instituting these different policies. It kind of goes along a continuum with an extreme being workplace violence. And unfortunately, there was the case in Boulder, Colorado, where there was a workplace shooting that included a grocery store, which had a Starbucks location inside of it. Logan Smith, who's a barista there, who survived the shooting, has spoken out a lot about what it was like to be in that situation. So there's this whole continuum, and there were some quotes that came in from baristas and questions that said, we get customers who yell and scream at us. Has happened to me many times personally. How can we protect ourselves from customer abuse and violence? Another person said, last week, a woman came behind the counter onto the floor mats and spewed transphobic BS at one of my baristas for making her drink wrong. So these are just some examples of what folks are experiencing. Any thoughts or tips on how to deal with customer abuse and also just kind of like workplace violence more generally as well?
Right. Well, there's no question about it. Employer has an obligation and responsibility to protect workers from violence. So let's get that clear. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
also another big theme is that legally employers have the responsibility to ensure that workplaces are safe and healthy. So I want folks to really let that seep in, as simple as it
Yeah.
is. Just because there starts this blame game of like among workers, among, sort of individualizing the problem. And the reality is that the employer is accountable to ensuring that. So to your question about, workplace, potentially these incidents of workplace violence, many states have standards that workers can use around workplace prevention programs. So the employer should have programs in place of what to do, how to report incidents, and how to minimize it getting to the extreme of something, so violent and aggressive as that. But in the states that there isn't a specific standard or law around workplace violence, federal OSHA, and I just want to also maybe make that distinction to the audience here who may not be that familiar. OSHA,
Mm-hmm.
the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is the government agency responsible for healthy and safe workplaces, ensuring that employers are following the law.
Mm-hmm.
So just so you know, some states have state plans. So like California has Cal OSHA. With that said, some states may have more rigorous laws. Federal OSHA has a minimum standard. So if you are in a state that may not have a workplace violence prevention standard or law, OSHA could use the general duty clause. Now, I want to be also very clear. I'm not telling folks here, run to OSHA and file a complaint. Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
mere threat of that to the employer is enough to have them take action. And because it's such an understaffed agency, again, the important part here is that workers come together and file these incident reports. Another little insight that Noel made me aware is that that to my knowledge, the Starbucks system is called the filing an incident report. And these need to be filed for every instance of harassment or endangerment. So most baristas think you have to be a supervisor to file one, which is not true. Anyone, even a trainee, can file one and should. You can also backdate them if you realize the next day was bad enough to file a report. So many supervisors may hesitate to file an incident report for fear that having too many on their record will will be held against them. But if a store manager or district manager is using that tactic to reduce their number of incident reports, they should be reported to corporate. I mean, and the number of incident reports is strong counter argument against low customer connection scores. So
Uh-huh.
it's how one of the questions that was brought up is how could you connect when there are instances of death threats that day? I mean,
Wow.
you're operating from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to use these incident and file the incident reports. Another piece is there's a customer connection scores, and there needs to be
Mm-hmm.
a campaign, ideally, to get rid of these, allowing customers to rate scores on their speed or quality of making people feel safe and welcome would be an acceptable alternative. So
Yeah.
again, and then making sure you have local numbers, such as from the police, the security, how to take quick action. And I want to mention that having these guides is all part of a workplace violence prevention program. So look it up. If you're in a state such as California, you may have this program in place. And if not, you could use the general duty class as a reference.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Awesome. That's so much good information packed in there. That's great. I love it.
mhm.
Okay, so you mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned that OSHA is understaffed, and understaffing is definitely an issue that comes up a lot with baristas as well. So going on that theme, that's always an issue that comes up a lot. And especially when it comes to workplace health and safety, because if you feel that your store is understaffed and now there's even more required of you during COVID for cleaning, keeping the cafe clean, and basically it's just like harder to do your job these days. So that makes it hard. There have to be shortcuts taken. And then there's the issue of, as you just said, like you want to keep your customer connections as well. So there's just like a lot going on. It can just be very stressful. So a couple quotes related to staffing levels that we heard are, why are we not supplied enough labor to deploy partners to control the amount of people who enter the store? So staffing related to social distancing. And then it's hard to keep an active person on sanitizing when most of the time it's busy and not staffed enough. So I'd love to hear if you just have any thoughts on how those two things relate, staffing and health and safety, and what baristas could do if they feel that the store is not staffed appropriately to keep the level of health standards that are expected.
Right. No, that's a great question, and one that we hear in multiple industries, including government agency, right? When there's a demand. I think that, there's a lot to be said for a time-honored practice of working to safety rule. Workers need to
Hmm.
follow safety practices to protect themselves, the customer, and their jobs. So
Yep.
having this sort of understanding that if a worker is safe and feel safe, and we have guidelines in place that allow for that safety to materialize in a real way, then customers are safe as well. So really holding, Starbucks, the company, accountable, like it's part of their mission to ensure that workers are content, and that customers are content. So having safe workers is important. So one of the tips that I also got, again, and this is where Noel's barista experience was very helpful, is that you can immediately up the labor hours allocated to the store by ensuring that all drink remakes, often which are like, to my understanding, greater than 5 for particular difficult customers, and freebies are logged into the system. So drinks totals per day and per hour is used to calculate labor hours that are allocated, and every glass of water given out should go through the system. It may slow things down and so forth, but at least, you can keep a register of, how much work there is. And that way, you can make the case that you need more staff. Also, I know that closing shifts are notoriously understaffed. Baristas frequently clock out and keep working off the clock at close because they fear their manager, or personally concerned for the opening team. And it's important that you not cheat your time card.
Mm.
Documentation is important for all workers. Making sure that you log in those hours so it's very visible. This is the sort of staffing support that we need at this cafe. is very important. One of the new terms that I heard that may not be new to your audience is avoiding, any cloaking, which is making, sure you
Opening, yep,
close
yep.
and open.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to get stuck in that. You refuse to do that. And if you get hours reduced because of saying you're not going to close and open, well, it's important to maintain that documentation. And again, when I say maintain documentation, the goal is to ultimately be able to present it to corporate or to district managers in a collective way. If you can get your cafe to come together and sign as a collective, it has so much more power than writing an individual letter coming from one worker of concern, because it's easily lost through corporate. And it's hard to find. To my understanding, it's really difficult to find even corporate, Starbucks corporate emails of leadership, so management, and they intentionally make it that hard. So you sort of give up in the process. So having that knowledge is quite important.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I can't believe how fast the time is going, but there's so much good information here. We're going to cover two more things, mental health, and let's go back and talk more generally about OSHA and where things are at right now. But also just want to put in one more pitch. If people do have questions that you don't hear coming up yet, definitely put them in the chat and we'll prioritize those for sure. Okay, so let's get into the issue of mental health, if that's cool. Starbucks does offer some benefits in terms of mental health. They got a lot of positive press for getting access to a free, like, kind of meditation mindfulness app to workers. At the same time, that came when a lot of baristas were talking about how they were really stressed in understaffed stores. So the vibe that a lot of baristas were sharing was that it's the job itself that causes the stress. So the free access to the app about stress reduction is kind of a draw there.
Yeah.
So one quote from a barista is, "I have never, all caps, worked somewhere as toxic, stressful, and rude as Starbucks." So what should baristas do to prioritize and make sure that they're getting what they need in terms of mental health? And what is the company responsible for there?
Right. I mean, I think this is a good question, and I think it's one where you also need to hold the employer clearly accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Asking for information on their current programs is one very important. Having clarity on what that is and what the access looks like to be able to use it in moments of real, not this sort of publicity stunt, right? Where you want to promote the company as being so grandeur, but the reality is, as this barista said, it sort of embeds a toxic culture. So
Mm-hmm.
workers should demand that the company implement innovative programs to support and provide resources to its workers to deal with this hazard. And again, this hazard, the irony of it is that sometimes a hazard is stemmed in the overworked, worker, the understaffing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the high demands from, customers, and having, not enough baristas in place or systems in place that support workers to thrive as workers.
Yep.
So I think that that's an important piece. Um, and again, there could be, real support looks like is actually having, seeking professional help, ensuring that there's coverage. Therapy is not free, you know what I mean? So making sure that you have the full package. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that is sort of also counter, because the stress roots from the workplace. So you
Right,
want to
right.
make sure that there are the systems that minimize that stress, and that you're clear on that you don't internalize that as like, am I the only one that thinks, that I'm stressing over this? Talk to
Mm-hmm.
your workers. How do you feel? Maybe during a break, find out, talk to your coworkers. Do you realize that there are some common themes around what you're all feeling about working at this site? And if it
Mm-hmm.
seems to resonate with all of you, then it's obviously not an issue for you to internalize, but one for you to work with your coworkers and demand that change.
Mm. That's so well said. And I see a lot of kind of like mutual support in that way happening in different like Facebook groups, on subreddits, even people sharing their struggles and being really supportive of each other. So it's good to see the seeds of that happening already for sure. Um,
Right.
okay. And then I did want to kind of like close out this part by zooming out again to, you talked a little bit about federal OSHA and what their job is, and, some strategies there. just kind of want to zoom out and see like what's the snapshot of where things are at right now with the federal government and OSHA. And, people might have heard that there's like, the possibility of an emergency temporary standard on COVID-19. What does that mean?
Great. So that's a really good question. A lot of people might not know what that is or how that impacts their work site. So OSHA, as I mentioned earlier, is the agency that ensures that employers maintain healthy and safe workplaces. The reality is that under the Trump administration, OSHA was completely MIA when we mostly needed OSHA. The pandemic happened, the workplaces, essential frontline workers were, highly impacted. There was guidance, but nothing enforceable. Come now the shift in administration, we are hopeful, again, optimistically hopeful that this new administration will take action. We know that Biden has prided himself in saying he's worker friendly. So we're hoping that with an emergency temporary standard, basically a law that would provide, would tell employers that they must have a COVID prevention plan, would allow workers to have the tools and arm themselves with the argument of why we need now more than ever to ensure that our workplaces follow the mask, the social distancing, the better ventilation, good air quality, and so forth. So us at National Kosh are definitely doing the work on the ground to ensure that this emergency temporary standard, or ETS, is passed, so we can make sure that we have that law and we can use it in pressuring employers to continue to, to use safe practices. And that's, we're optimistic that it'll be released, in the coming weeks. But I also understand the reality that, CDC comes out with these guidance that completely contradict OSHA. So at least with this ETS, workers have something in law that they can use to leverage their request for safer workplaces.
Got it. Okay, that's great. Yeah, and it's funny to see that distinction there between the two agencies.
Yeah, it's
Thanks
a
for
little
mentioning that.
complicated,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. To say that, yeah, for sure. Amazing. Cool. Well, we're almost, out of time, but I do want to give, first of all, I just want to mention to everyone who's been tuning in that National Kosh's website is linked in our profile. So if you just go to our bio, you can click the link and you'll see that there. But I'd love to hear just like, tell us more about how folks can connect with your organization and any kind of like, final words of advice for baristas and especially if there are questions that come up later from folks that didn't get addressed tonight.
Right. Well, your first question is simple. Follow us at National Kosh, which is just, our handle at National Kosh. We, not just because we like the following and the likes, but because we really, really do put a lot of work into putting out educational content that's, fun to see while you're scrolling through your Instagram or Twitter, that's really relevant and can help you in navigating and understanding what are some of your rights. So that's a simple ask. I also invite you to check out our website for more, if you want to delve a little deeper into some of the resources that we have in multiple languages. And then in terms of last tip, I could only say that there is so much power in collective action, and I can't emphasize that enough. Workers being able to come together. In this case, if Starbucks baristas, coffee workers came together, requested a meeting with their district managers and say, this is what we want. We need to stay safe. If you are truly committed to a culture of happy customers, happy baristas, then this is what we need. And again, I'm not discouraging you as an individual to do something, but there's so much more power in collective action that I think, real change can happen that way.
Well said. I completely agree. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Really want to encourage folks to, this video will be available afterward for everyone to look back at. Definitely share it with your coworkers and anyone really in the industry. And definitely reach out to both organizations, Coworker, National Kosh, and let us know what questions you have or what support you need to be sure that you and your coworkers are safe in your workplace. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining. This is hopefully a series. We'll have one more planned, but we'd love to hear feedback from folks about, what's useful to you, what information would be good, and maybe we'll have more from there. And yeah, just keep following Coworker, sign up on our email list. And I should mention, if you do want to take collective action and you're looking for somewhere to begin, we do have a link of where you can start a petition on Coworker's petition platform to change a workplace issue. Pretty easy to get started. And then there's also a contact us page where you can ask us for more questions and advice and stuff like that. So thank you all so much. Thanks, Jessica. Stay safe.
Thank
Hope
you
you're doing
so
well.
much again for the invite. Thanks, everyone. Follow
Awesome.
us at National Kosh and follow Coworker as well. See ya.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Talk to you all later. Bye.